Chapter 3: The Murderous Corpse of the Deserted Grave. Since then, Huguohua has been a soldier and has to be reused. But in that era, the world was in chaos, the warlords were fighting, and a team of 100 people could be divided into one side. Today you destroy me, tomorrow he will clean you up again, and few forces can survive for a long time. The warlord Huguohua followed was originally not very powerful, and within a year, he was beaten to pieces by another warlord in the battle for territory, and the troops died and fled, and the warlord leader who promoted Huguohua was also killed in the melee. After the defeat, Huguohua ran back to his hometown. At this time his family's dilapidated house had already collapsed, and he fled in a hurry. He didn't have any money with him, he hadn't eaten for 2 consecutive days, and his addiction to cigarettes had flared up again, so he had to sell the pistol to the bandits and exchange it for some tobacco and grain to relieve his urgent need. He thought about it. It's not a matter if it goes on like this. This bit of food and tobacco is enough to last 3 or 5 days at most. What should he do after he eats it all up? Then he remembered what the dead soul had said about the woman on the white paper, and when he was too poor to live, he went to find a lonely grave without a tombstone in the deserted grave of 13 miles, where she said that there were gold and silver jewelry that she was buried with. At this time, Huguohua had been a soldier and fought a war, and he was much more courageous than before. Huguohua had heard a veteran in the army say a lot of tomb robbery is also called inverted bucket among the people, and he can make a windfall, but he also wants to lose his head if he catches it, so he didn't dare to act in the daytime, put his heart sideways, lit a wind lantern on a hairy moon night, resisted a shovel, and went to the cemetery of 13 miles. The magistrate asked, "What is a hairy moon?" There were no clouds in the sky, but the moonlight was not bright and hazy. Of course, modern people know that this is a meteorological phenomenon. The scientific name is moon halo, which means that the sky is about to change and the wind is blowing. But who in the countryside at that time understood these scientific explanations? In some places, the countrymen call this kind of moon the hairy moon, and some people say that this kind of moonlit night is the favorite time for lonely night ghosts to come out and hang out. When he arrived at the place, he first drank half a caddy of soju with him to strengthen his courage. That night, the moon was cold and the stars were cold, the Ian wind was blowing, there were pieces of phosphorus fire floating in the grave, and from time to time there were a few squeaky strange bird calls, and the wind lamp in his hand flickered and dimmed, and it seemed that it could be extinguished at any time. Although Huguohua had just drunk at this time, he was still scared into a cold sweat by this ghost place. This time it was good. The half-caddy burning knife was drunk in vain, and it all went out along the sweat pores. Fortunately, this is a wild grave. No one knows what age it is, there is no one near it at all, and he is not afraid of being heard when he shouts. Huguohua sang a few mountain songs to give himself courage, but there are not many songs, and there are no words without singing a few words, so he simply sang the most familiar 5 more lovesick tunes, and 18 touches, on weekdays. Huguohua trembled and went to the center of this large cemetery, where there was indeed a lonely tomb without a monument, and in this barren cemetery, this tomb looked so different. In addition to the fact that this tomb does not have a tombstone, what is even more strange is that the coffin of this tomb is not under the mound of sealed earth, but is inserted in the mound of the grave, revealing most of the truncation. The coffin was very new, and it was shining with 18 layers of vermilion lacquer, shining with a strange light under the glow of the waning moon. Huguohua muttered in his heart, "Why is this coffin placed like this? It's so fucking weird, I'm afraid it's famous. But it's all here, wouldn't it be in vain if you don't open it and take a look? Death of starvation without money to buy food is a death, and suffocation of a smoking addiction without money for smoking is also a death. It is better to let the ghost strangle to death." Made up his mind, picked up the shovel and dug up the sealed soil buried in the lower half of the coffin, and the whole coffin was presented in front of him. He didn't rush to open the coffin, sat on the ground, took out the cistanche paste he was carrying, and sucked it into his nose. The brain was stimulated by opium, and the nerves were also excited, and he gritted his teeth and stood up, and pried open the lid of the coffin with an iron shovel, and the corpse inside was a beautiful woman, with a lifelike face, but the powder on the face was rubbed very thickly, and 2 large pieces of red rouge were smeared on both sides of the face, which looked like 2 red plasters were pasted against the background of the white foundation. This female corpse is by no means the big-faced woman I saw 2 years ago, and the paperman asked him to dig the grave 2 years ago. After so long, even if the female corpse was just buried at that time, it should rot after these 2 years. Could it be that she has become a zombie? But at this time, Hu Guohua couldn't care about it so much, and all he had in his eyes was the jewelry on the female corpse in the coffin. These gold, silver and gems flickered seductively in the light of the wind lamp, and the silver dollars wrapped in red paper next to her for burial, and there were many gold bars, which were almost impossible to count. This time he made a fortune. Hu Guohua reached out to pick up the emerald and gemstone ring worn by the female corpse, and just stretched out his hand. The female corpse in the coffin suddenly turned her arm and grabbed his wrist. The strength was amazing, the long nails like steel hooks. More than an inch fell into the flesh on Hu Guohua's wrist, and he couldn't break free. Hu Guohua was caught by her so painful that he was hurt and scared, and he didn't know what to do for a while. The female corpse opened her eyes and shot out 2 eerie cold lights from her eyes. Hu Guohua was touched by her gaze, and her whole body trembled with cold, as if she had fallen into an ice cave, and even her breath came out of white gas. The female corpse sneered and said, "You kid is really a money addict. Is a lowly person like you willing to do anything as long as he has money? I see that you have a useless heart, so I'll put it away for you first." When Hu Guohua heard that the other party wanted his heart, how to make it, he hurriedly said, Don't. The female corpse didn't allow him to say more, ripped off his clothes, and used his long nails as a chest cut. A fresh human heart jumped out of Hu Guohua's chest. The female corpse reached out and grabbed it, swallowed it in a bloody mouthful, and swallowed it without chewing. Hu Guohua was taken aback, looked down and saw that there was a scar on his chest, and he didn't feel pain, but he felt that his consciousness was getting more and more blurred, and his heart was empty, and he couldn't remember what happened just now, so he lay on the ground and called out to the female corpse repeatedly. The female corpse sat on the top of the coffin that was erected, and said coldly to Hu Guohua, "You are my puppet now. I will not treat you badly. I will definitely give you glory and wealth. You lead 8,864 women to this cemetery for me. Let me eat their hearts and livers. If there is a slight mistake, I will take your dog's life first." At this time, why did Hu Guohua dare not listen to her orders? The book endorsed. It turned out that the female corpse was a 100-year-old corpse demon, and she herself was in order to avoid the catastrophe, and she couldn't leave this hiding cemetery for the time being, so she designed to deceive Hu Guohua into digging the grave with an eye for money, and then coerced and lured him to catch an innocent woman for her to eat people's hearts. And after she ate 64 women's hearts and livers, even the gods in the lower realm could not bear her. Hu Guohua left the 13-mile cemetery with a lot of urine. He was so frightened that he was so scared that he was urinating all the time, and after he went back, he first stole a pair of pants from his neighbor's house to dry and put them on. I thought that this time it was troublesome. I didn't even have a wife, but where to find a woman for this monster, and I thought that I seemed to have something important taken away by the monster, but I couldn't remember what it was. Anyway, it was very, very important. If I couldn't find a woman to give her to eat, I couldn't save my life. How could this be good? Thinking wildly in his mind, he suddenly felt the 2 big gold bars in the pocket of the stinky pants that he had just replaced, which were awarded to him by the female corpse master. Hu Guohua frowned, and came up with a bad idea. Alas, in order to survive, he could only be sorry for his conscience. When he thought of the word conscience, he felt weird, but now he can't think about it so much. The most important thing is that it is better to die than to live, and lack of virtue is lack of virtue. Early the next morning, I went to the county town to exchange the gold bars into a cash ocean, found a tobacco shop to smoke a good time, and spent 10 yuan to buy a 17 or 18-year-old girl in a poor ravine village, in the early years of the Republic of China. Although the ban on human trafficking, but the common people were so poor that they could not survive, and the sale of children and daughters was not uncommon. And the government could not stop prohibiting it, and this law was useless. Bought this big girl on the way. Hugwohwa told her that he bought her back to be a daughter-in-law, so that she didn't have to worry. Let's go back and live a good life. You follow me. Let you eat fragrant and spicy food in the future. Wear gold and wear silver. The eldest girl's name is Xiaozi, and the countrywoman is thin-skinned, and she doesn't dare to look up at him with a red face, so she lets him walk without saying a word. Hugwohwa took the little donkey, carried Xiaozi, and took advantage of the dark moon and high wind that night to go straight to the deserted grave of the 13-mile shop. The mountain road is rugged and difficult to walk. Hugwohwa is afraid of missing the time. Hurry up, on the way to meet a feng shui gentleman surnamed Sun. This Mr. Sun is a famous mage in the province. His natural yin and yang eyes not only can see feng shui fortune-telling, but also can escape the 5 elements of thaumaturgy. As soon as Mr. Sun saw Hugwohwa, he found that his face was faintly covered with a layer of black gas, and he was really surprised when he pinched his fingers. Hurley stopped him and asked, "This master, what are you doing in such a hurry?" Hugwohwa said impatiently that I have something urgent, don't get in the way. Mr. Sun suddenly shouted, "I only ask you a word about the walking dead. Where is your heart and liver?" As soon as these words came out, Hugwohwa hurriedly knelt down and begged Mr. Sun to save his life. Mr. Sun helped him up. "Although you are morally corrupt, but there is no big fault. You must know that it is not difficult for me to save you, but you must first worship me as a teacher and quit smoking." Hugwohwa heard him say that if he wants to quit smoking, it is better to take his own life. But after careful consideration, his life is heavier than the smoke and soil, and he is still in the Green Mountains, not afraid of no firewood. I first begged him to save me from the entanglement of the female corpse, and in the future, while he was unprepared, I continued to smoke my Sistan ointment. And I was afraid that he would find out. I had made up my mind, so I called out to Mr. Sun 8 times on the mountain road and bowed to my teacher. Then Mr. Sun arranged everything properly, and instructed Hugwohwa to act according to the plan, and he followed behind from a distance to protect. At the time of the middle of the day, Hugwohwa took Xiaozi and rushed to the 13 miles of the deserted grave. The female corpse had been waiting for a long time, scolded Hugwohwa a few words, couldn't wait to catch Xiaozi, stretched out her claws and took out her heart and liver, swallowed it. The female corpse suddenly screamed, and tore Xiaozi's body into pieces. At this time Xiaozi has already shown its original form. It turns out that Mr. Sun has also treated his body with his own way. This fake Xiaozi is also a paper person. The real Xiaozi has long been left elsewhere by Mr. Sun. The heart eaten by the female corpse is a black donkey hooves in a paper figure, which is the most evil spirit, especially to restrain monsters such as zombies that have undergone corpse transformation. Tomb robbers are divided into several schools, and the tomb robbers in the south of the Yangtze River should be loaded with 2 black donkey hooves in their arms when they work. This method comes from the secret art of Maoshan Mountain, which will be discussed in the future, and will not be explained in detail here. The devil ate the hooves of the black donkey, knew the other party's way, and in his rage, he also wanted to tear Hugwohwa to pieces. But Hugwohwa had already avoided it, and the female corpse looked up to the sky and howled. The clothes on her body turned into ashes one by one, and the flesh turned into blood, and it didn't take long for only a white Sinsen skeleton to fall to the ground. Mr. Sun saw clearly from a distance, hurried over, found a red pill the size of a chicken egg in the skeleton, and ordered Hugwohwa to eat it. Hugwohwa's heart and liver finally returned to the old place. The two of them worked together to put the white bones on the ground into the big red coffin, and just about to cover the coffin, Lingbeating's skull jumped up, opened his mouth and spit out a black mist to Mr. Sunday. But he had been sinister for a long time, and he did not panic at all at this moment, and with a strong push he closed the coffin board, took out the long nails and nailed them to death, and used an ink fountain to crisscross the coffin with ink lines, which formed a large black net like the grid of a Go chessboard, sealing the coffin tightly. Mr. Sun had just been hit by the Yin-Chi of the zombies, and the injury was not light, and after this busy time, he sat on the ground and couldn't move, So he asked Hu Guohua to pile up some dry wood and burn the vermilion lacquer coffin. Hu Guohua obeyed the order, lit a fire and burned the coffin. The flames rose brightly, and streams of black smoke came out, which was indefatigable, and finally burned into a pile of ashes. Hu Guohua then remembered that there were still many gold, silver and jewelry in the coffin, stomped his feet and sighed, regretting that it was too late. So he had to support his master Mr. Sun, pick up Xiaocui, and go to Mr. Sun's house to live together. After that, Mr. Sun cured Hu Guohua's smoking addiction with a secret recipe, taught him some skills to read feng shui words. Hu Guohua set up a stall in the county, measured a word for people to look at the face, made some small money, married Xiaocui as a wife. He thanked the master for saving his life, and since then he has been in peace and kept himself, and his life has been getting better day by day. However, Mr. Sun has not been able to recover since he was sprayed by the corpse gas, and the corpse poison and cold air penetrated the bones, and he returned to the west after a few years. Before dying, Mr. Sun summoned Hu Guohua to his front and said, "You and I are a master and apprentice, just for the teacher, and will not have time to teach you any real skills in the future. I have an ancient book here. 16 characters Yin and Yang Feng Shui Secret Techniques. This book is a fragment, only half a volume, just some small techniques to look at feng shui to find the tomb. You just stay by your side to make a commemoration." After saying that, he didn't catch his breath and passed away. Hu Guohua buried his master, and when he had nothing to do, he studied the remnants of the book left by Mr. Sun, and over time, he also got a glimpse of some mysteries, and chose some good burial grounds for rich people everywhere in the county, and gradually became famous, and his family property gradually became rich. Xiaocui gave birth to a son to Hu Guohua, named Hu Yunxian. Hu Yunxian was 17 years old, went to the British church school in the provincial capital to study. The young man was active and unrestrained, and at the same time he was exposed to the impact of some revolutionary thoughts. His whole body was full of enthusiasm, and he dreamed of participating in the revolutionary riots every night. So he ran away from home and went to Yan'an, the holy land of revolution. After that, Hu Yunxian joined the army, until the founding of the People's Republic of China. At the time of the Huaihe campaign, he had become the commander of a regiment in the San 6 columns, and after the battle of crossing the river, he went south with the army and settled his home in the south. Then there was me. I was born at a very coincidental time, just in time for the August 1st Army Day. My father named me Hu Jianjun, but when I went to kindergarten, I saw that there were 7 or 8 people in a class called Jianjun, and there were too many duplicate names, so I changed my name to Hu Bai. My grandfather Hu Guohua said, "This name has been changed well, and Shanhe, Hu, is 80,000 tubes." When I was 18 years old, my family was impacted. First of all, the heads of Mino Noji fell first, and then gradually involved, plus my parents were not from a very good background. He and my mother were both isolated and censored, and my grandfather was also pulled out as a bull, ghost, snake, and god to criticize and fight on the street. He was old, and the strength of his old arms and legs couldn't stop tossing. And he died without fighting twice. He showed others a lifetime of feng shui, chose a cemetery for others, and was cremated when he was dying, and the world is so impermanent. My house was copied 3 times, everything of value was stolen, and my grandfather liked to collect antiques when he was alive, and these antiques were either smashed or copied, and none of them were saved. In the end, the only thing left was a book left behind by my grandfather, who told me to wrap it in an oilcloth and hide it on the roof of a public toilet. Young people during the Cultural Revolution had 3 choices after graduation. One was to join the army, which was the best place to go. One was to train people, and the other was to be assigned jobs after changing jobs in the future. The second is to stay in the city as a worker, which is also good and can earn a salary. The most unfortunate are those who have no way, it doesn't matter, or their homes are impacted. These young people can only go up the mountains and go to the countryside to cut the queue. If you want to say that I choose the 4th way and don't go anywhere, I'll stay home, okay? That's not okay. There were no idlers at that time who said this. Everyone is a screw of socialism, and everyone is useful. If you want to stay at home, the neighborhood committee, the school, and the educated youth office will come to mobilize you every day. But some people insist on the end and don't cut the line. What can you do to me? In the end, such people stayed in the city and were given jobs. This is the case in China. It is not clear to say, the more you live, the more confused you become. You will never know what the rules are, and the unspoken rules are not understood by everyone. At that time, I was too young, and I didn't know what was going on in the mountains and going to the countryside. Anyway, if I wanted to join the army from a family like me, there was definitely no hope of joining the army, and no one would care about arranging work if I stayed in the city, and there was no other place to go if I didn't cut the line. Most of us here choose to go to Yunnan, Xinjiang to cut the line. I chose to go to Inner Mongolia, and I have the same as my buddy Wang Kai-xian. He is wider than usual, fatter, so the nickname is Fatty. The place where we cut the queue is called Ganggangingzi. I have never heard of this place name before, until they told me that I went to this Ganggangingzi. I just knew that there was such a place in the world. When we left home by train, no one came to see us off, and compared with the warm farewell scenes of those who went to the army to join the army, the scene of us educated youths leaving home was a bit tragic. I only brought with me the book, The Secret Art of Yin and Yang Feng Shui, hidden on the roof of the public toilet. I don't know what it is, but it is the only thing I have left in my house, and I want to take it with me and take it out when I feel homesick.